Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Giorgi Tinacci. He's the founder and CEO of Casavo. Giorgio, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And well, this is going to be, as you know, a short interview. Is more about your personal career, how you got to this, where you are at now with Casavo. Let me first introduce briefly our school and what is your audience, and then we are going to start with some questions. So this is ESCP Business School. It's the oldest business school in the world. We have 6 campuses across Europe. We have in Paris, actually, we have 2. And then we have London, Madrid, Torino, Berlin, and Warsaw. So overall, this year we got 110 students among 3 different real estate programs at ESCP. And basically, this is going to be your audience. Students are master's students. They are about 22 to 25 years old on average. Very entrepreneurial. We have actually in some of our masters about 45 hours in Proptech. So they already know a lot. I'm sure all of them know about Casavo, and I'm sure everyone is really excited to see you today with us. So let me start going back to your roots, your early studies at University of Bocconi. We know you did a bachelor degree in business administration, and then you did a master in international management. So it was not technology. Of course, Casavo there is a business there, but I'm wondering what motivated you to study business at that point?
No, I would say, so first of all, I come from a very small village close to Florence. I mean, you find that a lot of students in Bocconi are actually not from Milan. Actually, there is almost no one from Milan, so I'm one of those. And I had a true passion for analytical and mathematical studies, but I was a very pragmatic person, and I have to be honest. I like to build things on my own, even when I was pretty young. So I thought that doing a business study or academic path could allow me to have that kind of toolkit, right, in my professional life. So that's why I decided to join the Bocconi University, which is clearly a non-technological path, right? But I have to say that during my studies, randomly, I had the opportunity to do a lot of stuff in tech. It was by pure luck, was not intentional, I have to say, but I had this opportunity because already when I was during university, I could do an internship for a food delivery platform that was launching in Hong Kong back in 2014, I think. So that was my first experience in a tech startup, effectively, right? And that was the first time, and I was very excited about that opportunity. I was thrown in the middle of this very hectic launch, and I liked it. And then second random professional event was that I joined a consulting firm, BCG, at the end of my studies. But randomly again, I was part of the technology team there. So completely different kind of technology from what I'm doing today. So mainly like digital transformation projects for large corporations. But again, it was in technology again. And since when I was a child, I had a true passion on my own for technological stuff as well, right? So so it was a trend topic of my academic path and my early days in the professional life. So it was a mix of this, I would say.
And now it was 2015, if I am correct, when you finished your master. You founded Casavo in 2017. I'm really curious what happened in those 2 years. So you are done with your masters. You have whole life, professional life ahead. What was happening in your mind? Because remember, like our audience is almost at this stage, so yes, they're really curious about that.
No, I would say First of all, at least for me, from the Bocconi University at the time, for like I was like in one of these top tier programs of the master, and it was not common at all. I would say pretty rare that people would consider joining a startup or founding a startup at the time. So it was very, very rare, and things have changed a lot, I would say, in the last 5 years, to be honest. But at the time, it was something very rare. It was not common. It was pretty common in London. It was common in Berlin and maybe Madrid as well. I don't know at the time, but not from Bocconi in Milan. And but I had a true passion for doing. So I was running a lot of like entrepreneurial things and projects on my own already. When I was doing university, I remember that everything that I was studying, I was framing it, or I was thinking about it in the concept of, okay, if I build something on my own, what will happen? I remember I did my first like bachelor thesis on like the startup legal entities, which was a new government thing in Italy, which happened at the time, and I was thinking about, okay, how can I apply this? I didn't have clear ideas, right? But I knew, or I had a passion that I wanted to do something on my own at some point. And so in those 2 years, essentially, what happened is that I knew that at some point I wanted to become an entrepreneur, but I didn't have clear ideas at all when I finished my master. So as it happened, typically, I mean, I joined a consulting firm, and for me, it was a sort of like post-university training and learning in some way, right? So there, I think in those 2 years at BCG, I didn't get like meaningful vertical competencies that I could reuse as an entrepreneur, because it was completely kind of job and completely kind of technology. But it helped me to shape even more after university my mindset framework in order to approach problem solving in the proper way as an entrepreneur moving forward, right? So I would say that I worked a lot in those 2 years, but I think the most relevant thing that happened is that they helped me to be disciplined and shape my way of thinking, which turned out to be extremely effective in terms of having the basic toolkit to approach problem solving as an entrepreneur when I decided to found my company, essentially.
Great, and let's now touch, Giorgio, a very important aspect when you found a company. You found it alone, and this is always something that we hear stories like if you do with a partner, you may have problems. The best is you found it alone. There are different perspectives, but your case, a clear case of very successful a company, and you were the only founder. So why was that? What was your environment around that time so that you made a decision? And also, were you struggling because you were at this time alone with a big responsibility?
I think first of all, based on my experience, in retrospective, I would never do this choice again. So I would strongly suggest everybody to have at least a co-founder, a very complementary co-founder. But I mean, maybe it's because I don't have it, so I regret it a bit. But the solo founder setup is extremely challenging, in my opinion, psychologically, in terms of skills. So it requires you to build a very, very strong management team. I mean, that should be the case anyway, but even more in a solo founder setup, and to make sure that you are providing the right intrinsic and extrinsic incentives to that management team, which is not granted at all. So I was lucky in that regard. So I feel that I have a lot of co-founders, which is my management team, effectively, especially those coming from the very old days of the company. But I would never do it again. So if I do something else in the future, in 10 years, another company, I think I will never do it in the same way with this regard. Second point is that at the time, actually, I had a co-founder, but we decided, because we had different, he was a German serial entrepreneur, and it didn't make sense at all based on the kind of like strategy we were foreseeing. So we had in mind very fast internationalization, and we realized after 3 months that it didn't make any sense at all, etc., etc. So given that it changed a bit the strategy for the first 5-10 years versus what we had in mind on paper at the very beginning, his contribution didn't make any sense. So we are in very good relationship, but he decided to sell very early and to exit at Series A. So he sold, but so I had a co-founder at the very beginning, not as involved as I am and as I was, but I mean, we decided to move forward in this way. But yeah, bottom line, I would strongly suggest everybody to have at least a co-founder.
Very interesting insights. I'm sure like people are like paying a lot of attention to this point. And now, instead of me presenting Casavo, because I'm not the right person in front of you, we all know it's an instant buyer, really successful in Europe. Can you explain briefly what is the business model to our audience?
Yes, of course. So first of all, it's a new market category, completely new in real estate, that emerged in the US a few years ago. So it's not a label that we invented, but actually another company in the US, which is called Open Door, and it's now a listed company, labeled this term for the first time, actually, for the whole category. So essentially the concept is that we start from the problem of people that want to sell a home. Probably that's not your case, I guess, but if you want to sell a home, is one of the most stressful experiences in one people's life. And because it's a very like long process, complex to be managed, and creates uncertainty because there is no information transparency, essentially. We try to solve this problem by changing the paradigm and removing one step in the process, which is the one of finding the buyer, because we act ourselves as an instant buyer indeed. So you want to sell your home, come to our platform, type in your property details, you get an online instant evaluation based on our algorithm, and then if you press the button, metaphorically, get a cash offer, we make a cash offer and we buy in Spain actually at the moment in 7 days. And then what we do is that we take the asset, we either refurbish it lightly or extensively, and then we find a final buyer. But we take the risk. So we are not a broker, we are an industrial home investor that leverage technology to make very fast cash offer. And the long-term vision is that an asset class such as residential real estate will go through a dramatic change, similarly to what happened to financial asset classes 300 years ago, right? So 300 years ago, if you wanted to sell shares of a company, you had to go through these physical stock exchanges. Then there were like merchants negotiating for you. It was very similar to real estate, right? And now what you can do is that you can sell a stock by pressing a button on your mobile with very low transaction cost. But you don't have to wait for a broker finding a buyer. I mean, you're just selling to a platform, which is a trading house, and then the trading house will sell it again, right? So the concept is that very long term is that thanks to technology and thanks to the evolution of capital markets, an asset class such as residential real estate could move from a commission-based brokerage model to a discount-based trading model, where you are just selling and buying from a platform instead of through brokerage from private people, essentially. That's a bit the concept, right? And that you can make it because through technology now you can have accurate pricing, and you can manage that process and reduce the transaction cost very much through technology. And then you have an evolved and a sophisticated capital market that is able to accommodate that over time. It's not something that is going to happen tomorrow, right? But that's my long-term thesis and the long-term thesis of investors that decided to invest in this category. And if you look at the evolution of the e-commerce in a more broad sense category, this is what's happening in other asset classes as well. If you look at automotive, that's the same. You see platforms such as Kazoo, Carvana in the US, Auto1. So there is this new wave of e-commerce, which is inventory bearing and is transacting very large tickets for consumers that were typically offline transactions before. And this is happening in real estate as well.
It's great hearing this from the founder perspective, because I guess that you spent a lot of time getting the concept, and it's really fascinating. Giorgio, another question, it's about traditional real estate agencies. You mentioned also brokers when you were explaining things. So do you see them as competitors, and also what future you foresee for them?
So differently from other players, so first of all, we are not a broker. So we are not like Housefile that you might know in Spain, or Housesell, or this kind of platform, which are broker competing with brokers essentially. But differently from other peers, we decided not to frame our value proposition in competition with brokers. So what I realized is that we were humble to understand that the real estate market cannot be disrupted overnight, takes time, and it's not a simple play, but it's actually a rather complex play. So we decided to build from the very beginning an inclusive model of real estate brokers, meaning that we could buy also from brokers, not just directly, meaning that partner brokers could offer our instant buyer service to their customers as well. And at the same time, we were leveraging on our brokers partnerships in order to sell apartments essentially. So we have a sales team, but we are not operationally managing every sale. Then there are some different cases now, but that's the general case. And so we leverage on them. So it all started with a very offline sales-driven relationship where we were buying also from them and selling through them as well. Now it evolved into like a proper technological offer where they can do a lot of stuff. So they have a dedicated software. It's becoming a sort of suite of our partner brokers. So they can request offers through iBuyer through this platform, so they don't have to call people from our teams locally, and it's more automatically processed and it's automated. They can also leverage on our platform in order to get exposure to their properties because we are getting more and more direct buyer traffic as well. And also as a third feature, we acquired at the end of last year the leading platform in virtual tours and augmented reality in Italy, which was also active in Spain already back in the days. So we integrated their offer into this suite for partner brokers. And what we are doing is that we are doing more and more product discovery in order to understand which additional features to build. Clearly, we are not Idealista, we are not a classified platform. So the kind of like features and services that we offer are very much distinctive based on our nature. So they are very much transactional, so to say.
Great. Now let's start the very important part of your business, which is research and development. You deal with algorithms. You have to make predictions. You need to understand what would be the right price that you're gonna buy. So I guess that there's of course something that is confidential, but there are other parts that you can tell us a little bit how your business works from a research and development point of view.
So first of all, to give you an order of magnitude of these, today it's growing very fast, but today we are roughly 200 people. If you remove corporate functions, the engineering team, so product and tech essentially, is more or less equivalent to our commercial teams on the ground that would buy and sell homes, right? So it's a Proptech environment indeed, right? So you have properties and you have technology. So roughly, I would say we probably have, I don't know, 60 people or something by now in the engineering team only. And that is research and development, essentially. We are a product first company, so we develop proprietary software solutions in that regard. Technology for us has three key pillars, I would say. The first one is about data and is the most fancy one, let me say, the one that people talk more about. It's very simple to understand. I mean, we need to be extremely accurate and fast in pricing. And this is how we can build a unique data competitive advantage in a market in which there is a very high level of information asymmetry. The second piece has to do, it's less fancy and it's not just about one product, but it's as important as data, in my opinion, in our business, which has to do with process automation in some way, right? So scalability in a broader sense. Because going through end-to-end a residential real estate transaction, it's very complex. It's much more complex than a financial transaction such as a wire transfer. It involves a lot of parties, and the only piece that was actually digitized over the last 10 years was just the home search experience from the buyer by classifieds platforms such as Idealista, Fotocasa, Immobiliare, etc. So the challenge here is to build an integrated architecture of different technological microservices that would industrialize and automate each piece of the transactional value chain. So the sourcing piece, the first valuation, the first underwriting decision process, the technical due diligence, the notary piece, the refurbishment piece, so the whole thing. And this requires a lot of effort, and this is where like most of our R&D investments are allocated, I have to say, by now. And the third piece about technology for us, it's about really how you translate these technology-powered operational excellence into an awesome and disruptive digital user experience for our customers, so both sellers, buyers, etc., which translate in consumer-faced technology, so in the form of website, mobile app, and whatever is relevant throughout the digital customer journey, essentially.
Well, really interesting. Now let's move to like fundraising. This is a very exciting part, but I think it's going to be challenging. When you founded, you were very young. You're young, and I mean, it was. What we know is that you're going to raise in total at this point 385 million euros. You had a start. You came to somebody and say, I need money. So again, keep in mind our audience is again like people that are doing a master. They're going to have great ideas, and they might be very close to that point. So how do you face that problem? What was your experience, and do you have any recommendation whether to wait a little bit and make some sales or just get some funding?
So first of all, my suggestion is always, try to go through that minimum viable product phase, which implies that try to do the most cost-effective experiment in order to see whether you can signal some early traction, right? So from my case, it was a very expensive experiment, though, because it was like showing that I could buy and sell our first home in the way we were imagining this, right? And see whether it was providing value to the market. But it's very specific. So my first suggestion is, first of all, try to run this like very experiment process. So creating a technological company and a startup, it's an iterative process. So you will continue to go through these experiment phases, and it's always like you see that you do 2 steps ahead and 1 step behind, and it's normal, but you have to learn from that step behind in order to move forward again, right? And you have to do it, especially at the very beginning, well, to understand how to move forward. So that's my first comment. Second comment is that it's a moment in which like there is a lot of availability of VC capital, especially early stage, I would say, in this time. So it's not like 10 years ago or 5 years ago. I think there is a lot of availability. My suggestion at the very beginning is that at least in Italy, but I guess in Spain as well, there is a very large ecosystem of like business angels, family offices, entrepreneurs. I think that especially the beginning, I would always prioritize that choice because they can give you a lot of credibility. And if they can be either your first customers or providing your first customers, especially if you are either part of the same industry or an adjacent industry, and they can be true mentors for you. And general message is that, at least from my experience, of course, money is money, but in a world in which you have a lot of availability of capital, it's very important that you choose what you think could be the right long-term partner, because it's a proper wedding. I mean, you become partners of these people, especially of the lead investors, and you need to feel very confident about that, right? So it's not easy. It's even when things go well, or at least so far in our case, it's a very intense journey, very intense. And so you need to make sure that you have the right people together with you, which can support you in good and bad times, right? Because everybody can support you in good times, but you'll have bad times. Even in the most successful case, you'll have bad times. And so make sure that you have someone that will be there also in bad times as well.
That's a great advice. I would like to know a little bit also about how it's gonna, what are the plans for Casavo for next year, and if you are developing like new technologies. I think you mentioned a little bit of that, but it would be great to know more about what is gonna be Casavo.
Yeah, I would say that the priorities at the moment for us are scalability. So we have shown, especially in Italy, that we could reach very high market penetration. So the product market fit, I would say, is very much validated at a good scale. So the point is simply like, how would you move from 100 transactions a month to 1,000 transactions a month without losing control and letting your organization explode, right? So it can only go through a maniacal focus on technological solutions in order to really standardize and automate each piece of your transaction. Second priority, so it's about, again, very hardcore research and development on that piece of the processes. Second point for us is about moving forward with our internationalization. So we entered Spain last year. So Spain for us, it's a strategic priority for two reasons. First of all, because the business opportunity per se is as large as Italy, so it's a very important market, but even more because that's our cornerstone in order to move forward with European expansion, essentially, right? So if we scale in Spain as we scaled in Italy, I think we have the proof that our product market fit scalability is replicable across very diverse markets moving forward, right? So Spain is a very important focus for us. It's going super well. We are growing a lot. We are actually hiring a lot as well, if you're interested, but that's for sure an important priority. And third priority for us is really to continue building this end-to-end marketplace, increasing the number of technological products and services we can offer to our customers, always starting from their buyer service. So I think our vision is not just to be a tech-enabled home flipper in the future, but is really to become a real estate platform across Europe that is going to provide services in different forms in a digital way to sellers, buyers, and real estate operators, so namely brokers, over time. So product expansion, it's a very important piece for us. So we prioritize more like horizontal scalability, so with more products in the same market rather than exponentially scaling in new markets abroad, because we are already operating in very large markets essentially, right? So that's a bit irrational.
That's really exciting, and we are getting out to the end of this very interesting interview. I have just one more question, and it's I'm asking for your advice or any suggestions for our students. We have, as I mentioned, this year is 110. We are growing like crazy. This is like a startup as well in terms of real estate. In continental Europe, there is not much real estate education. So many of them are like very energetic and they dream. So now what I would like to ask you is, do you have any suggestions for them at this point? Like they are, again, 24, 25 years old, so that their dreams become true?
So I would say that maybe it's a very silly advice, but do what you like. So I think lots of time in my early days of the professional life, right, I was tempted by professional decisions that were very appealing for the wide public, but maybe I didn't like them a lot, right? So I think going for something you have passion for and that you like over something you feel that the social community would appreciate, I think it's always the best choice, right? And then you see what comes down the road. And then I would say that, first of all, not everyone should found a startup. I mean, it's a very different job from another job, and it requires very different attitude and without any ethical judgment whether what's good or what's not good. And I would say that, but if you're interested in doing so or in joining a startup, I think it's a great experience, especially at the beginning of your learning process, because you get a lot of exposure and you can really learn meaningful things on your skin rather than from a hierarchical process with your boss in a more large corporate environment, right? Creates maybe a bit more stress and it's a bit more chaotic, but it's a very interesting experience. And even if it doesn't work or you realize that it's not what's the best fit for you, I mean, in the end, you can go back to a more traditional professional experience, but with a very good know-how, let's say, heritage. And so there is no drawdown or no backfire on that. So yeah.
Okay, so Giorgio Tinacci, founder and CEO of Casavo, it was a real pleasure having you with us today. Thank you so much for your time. We learned a lot. I'm sure our audience also learned a lot, and we're going to distribute in social media as well. So once again, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.